kick us
Sure.
off?
I'll just say welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining us on this Wednesday evening. My name is Thomas Gonzalez, and I am a mentorship chair with the City Hall Fellows Board. And City Hall Fellows is an organization that has launched a few fellowship programs in the country, including the SF Fellows program, which we'll talk about. And those are great ways to get your foot in the door as a recent college graduate or with a few years of experience. But we also want to talk generally, I think, about how to get into a career in local government, because City Hall Fellows, as a group, we feel that city government is one of the most rewarding places to work. You can have an impact on your community, and we need more bright, motivated individuals working in city government. So we're here to try to make that happen. And I actually don't work personally in city government, but I have before. I was a former fellow in San Francisco, and currently work with a lot of city governments as a land use economics consultant. And I'm located in Los Angeles, but most of our boards in San Francisco. And I think I'll turn it back over to Michael, but I think most of our conversation will kind of be oriented around the Bay Area, but also generally applicable. So thanks everyone for being here.
Thank you, Thomas. All right. So some general housekeeping. All attendees will be muted by default, but if you have questions or concerns throughout the presentation, please use the chat function. If you previously submitted questions, we'll try to address them throughout the presentation. And we're going to record this webinar, and we'll send you a link to it if you RSVP'd for the event. And finally, all this info is intended to be advice and to share our opinions and expertise. So please take from it what you can, and also let us know if there's anything we can do to improve. All right, so I think Thomas gave a pretty good spiel about who City Hall Fellows is. So my name is Michael Cox, and I am a co-chair of the events committee for City Hall Fellows. In my day job, I work for San Francisco Bay Area Rapid Transit, or BART for short, as a sustainability analyst, and I help track metrics related to BART's energy use, greenhouse gas emissions, water use, and waste generation. And also with us today is Deanna Hillbrandt, who is the Assistant Director of Business Services at Silicon Valley Power, and that is an electrical utility owned and operated by the city of Santa Clara. And Deanna is also a mentor in the CHF program, so we really appreciate her for coming to share her expertise and advice. So in terms of the agenda, the bulk of our conversation will be about applying and interviewing for an SF city job. So we're going to be focusing on local government jobs in SF because that's where CHF is based out of. And the civil process in SF is pretty standard when compared to other locations. But we'll also provide general tips that should be applicable no matter where you apply. We'll also talk about grad school and other post-grad programs to weigh the benefits and or drawbacks of going to school. And finally, we'll talk about other options to stay involved in public service, even if it's not a local government role per se. And at the end, we'll leave some time for questions that you may have for us. But as mentioned before, if you have any questions during the presentation, feel free to drop them in the chat and we'll be sure to address them as we move along. All right, so the first step of applying to a job is to find a job that interests you and is appropriate for where you are currently in your career. So the SF Department of Human Resources has a website, which is linked in the first bullet here, where you can look up what the different job classifications are and positions that are available, and also set up email notifications when new job announcements are posted that meet whatever jobs you are looking for. So in local government jobs, there are often classifications that basically summarize a level of roles and responsibilities that you would expect for a given job position. And these classifications might be only in one department, or they may be in multiple departments, depending on the roles that are entailed for that classification. The second link is a link to the descriptions for those classifications, and we're going to take a look at that in a second. And also, we're going to keep repeating this throughout this presentation, but when you're looking at the job classifications and the job requirements, for local government jobs, there are often minimum qualifications or work experience that you must meet in order to be eligible to have that job and come in for an interview. And you'll find that information on the job postings, and we will delve into that in detail. So I'm going to switch screens here. Okay, so this is the SF Careers website, and we can do a search. Let's say I wanted to be an analyst. I can search for that, and there's different classifications that come up. We'll choose administrative analyst as an example here. So if I click on that classification, it will tell me the details. First thing that will come up is the compensation. Obviously, we don't want to be working for free. So for most government jobs, they are going to post a range of pay that you would be eligible for in that classification. So step one is typically the first step that you enter, especially if you only meet the minimum qualifications for that role. You'll come in at step one, and that's the minimum amount that you would make in that classification if you were hired. But if you have more experience, you might come in at step 5 or step 3, for example. Or if as you're gaining more experience, once you have landed the job, you might be able to petition to go up to a higher step and increase your pay. Underneath that are the description for that classification. So as I mentioned, a classification might be for only one department, or it may be across the whole city. So on this page, you'll see the general descriptions, which are pretty broad for that classification. As an example, we'll see on number 4 here, an 1822 performs analysis for budget development and resource planning, or performs or assists in needs analysis and trend analysis based on research. So if we look at that, we know what the general role would entail, and then we can come down here to the minimum qualifications, which are used to establish whether you would be eligible for that role or not. So I'm going to delve into that in more detail with the specific example, but I want to show you that website first to give you an idea of what kinds of resources are out there to search for jobs. All right, so also on that website, you're able to have email notifications or set up email notifications when new jobs are posted. So you can set up those for specific classifications when they're posted, or you can set them up for key roles and responsibilities that you're interested in. And Local government job application processes are notoriously slow. You may need to allow up to 6 months for full application, interview, job offer process. Sometimes it can be shorter, sometimes it can be longer. But keep that in mind as you are looking for roles. And we have additional information about the hiring process in the link here. So we'll send that out on the slides later on. So going back to the minimum qualifications. So this is a job posting from, this is a specific job posting and the minimum qualifications for in 1822. So going from the top, the first four are the 4 different ways that you can meet the minimum qualifications. So you might have a graduate degree from an accredited college or university and 1 year of full-time equivalent experience performing professional level analytical work, or you might have a graduate degree and major coursework as described in Note B. The third example, maybe you just have an undergraduate degree and 2 years of full-time equivalent experience and professional analytical work described in Note A. So if we take a look here at Note A, qualifying professional level analytical experience must be in 1 or more of the following functional areas. So you want to make sure that whatever experience that you're using to meet the years of experience in 3 is equivalent to 1 of those functional areas. Oftentimes for certain classifications, there are a series of classifications. So for the 1820 series, 1820 would lead to 1822 to 1823. So if you were previously in 1820, the job experience that you got in that class would add up to qualifying professional level analytical experience. Great. And let's say maybe you don't have 2 years of experience, but only 1 year of experience. So instead of having just any baccalaureate degree, you have a degree with major coursework as described in Note B. So Note B says that coursework applicable to a baccalaureate or higher degree in a specialized subject matter area related to the following fields. So if you are applying to a finance position, maybe you have a degree in economics. That would be applicable coursework. So you would only need 1 year of experience rather than needing 2 if you had some other degree. So going to switch back to the website portal really quickly. So here's an application that I filled out just to show you what the fields look like. So obviously you're going to have to put in your personal information. And then typically the job portals have an area where you can list out your experiences. So because you need to meet a certain level of years, you want to list out as many of the experiences that are relevant as possible. So for example, If I was applying to an 1822, let's say I was an 1820 junior analyst at the Municipal Transportation Agency, and I conducted complex budget analyses of SFMTA's parking programs, or I published an annual report on the department's $1 million budget. So I used specific language from the job description to show whoever's looking at my application that I do have the specific experience that's listed in the minimum qualifications. And that's really important because sometimes the person who is doing a first review of the applications doesn't necessarily have experience in the job area that you're applying to. So you want to make it very clear that you have that experience. And again, I have my education, and I also want to put my resume. On these job portals, putting your resume is usually not a substitute for actually listing out the experiences that you've had. So don't do something like see resume for the experience. You do need to list out the individual experiences and then also have those on your resume because they are used for different things during the application process. All right, so we've been focusing on San Francisco. Deanna, do you have anything to add about applying to roles in other cities or agencies?
I had to drop off for technical issues, but I do want to agree with what you're saying about be very specific to, so very similar, be very specific to the job specifications that are there. You know, make sure you're aligning your responses to your questions to that. Overall, I'm going to say it's very similar in terms of they often bring in outsiders to review those applications. It could be somebody from HR who does a preliminary review, but sometimes they bring out, I've participated as a member of another department doing a review of applications. So take some time with that. You may get rejected for doing a C resume. If look at all of the what they're asking you for. Sometimes their resume is required. So even though you filled out the whole application, you could be rejected just for not adding a resume or a cover letter. So really read that. I worked with somebody on an application once and we both missed, which this feels crazy, but a typing test was required. So look for every little detail. Have a buddy to help you to look at those details, but generally the process is very similar. And what Michael said about aligning your responses, I don't know if you were talking about supplemental questions, but that's what other agencies are doing. And again, I apologize, I got kicked out of the internet for a bit, but that's when agencies have supplemental questions, that's where they're looking for you to be aligned. So that's a good opportunity to make sure you're looking at those, they call it KSAs, knowledge, skills, and abilities, and making sure your answers pick those words out and use them. And if you open up a document with some supplemental questions and you think, oh, I can't do that, leave it for a day, read all of those questions, start driving around, do your day, and you'll remember that you did some of those things. You don't have to have done them every single day for your whole career, but as long as you can tell a story about doing those things, you'll get through the next step of the process, and that's what's important.
I'll just add also, just to elaborate on that, I think one of the differences between government hiring and private sector hiring is that there's a lot of attention on making it a fair process, and that's where that matching the words exactly to the job description and when you describe your own experience is important, because the analysts reviewing don't have a lot of room to interpret creatively. So when you're applying for a government job, it's not necessarily the time to be creative and to look for a lot of synonyms that are similar to, just when possible, use the exact same terminology as in the job description to make sure that it's as easy as possible for them to advance you to the next round and then and get that level of consideration.
One more thing I wanted to add as well, and I apologize if it's been said already, but it is important. When you see a job posting, so let's say you see a posting in HR, but you really want to work in, let's say, social services or finance, sometimes the agency will use that same list for like a whole year. And so try to work your way through those questions, even if it's not the job you want, for those jobs that are in multiple departments. I'm not sure if that's true in San Francisco, but it's definitely true in agencies I've worked in, from counties to cities, that, to save time, they'll use the same list. That usually says in there that this list may be used to fill other opportunities as they arise. And so you don't want to miss out. There may be something in your dream department, but you didn't apply because you didn't know it was going to happen. So when you're looking at jobs, think about, if it's the title you want, think about going ahead and applying anyway.
And that is a good segue to our next slide, which is getting to the interview. So again, reiterating, once you have confirmed that you have met the minimum number of qualifying years of experience and shown that you have the requisite education, you will either get accepted to take an exam or come in to do an interview. So if you have partial years of experience for internships or part-time, be sure to add that on the portal or on your resume, because those years and hours do add up, and every little bit helps. So in the second column here, as Deanna was alluding to, there are certain roles where you do have to take an exam. These are called permanent civil service positions, and these are standardized exams for given job classifications, and the top scorers on those exams are placed on what's called a list. And then once that list has been created, a department can take interviews from people who have made it onto that list. So take, for example, you were interested in an 1820 position. You would first apply to that role. There'd be an exam, and you score in the top 5 on the exam, and that places you on a list. So later that year, they are able to do interviews and you can apply for that position. But later that year, maybe you didn't get that role, but another 1820 position opens up in the same department. They might use that list from the previous position that you applied for, and they might not necessarily schedule a new exam. So if you see a position, even if you're not super interested in it, but you know that this is the classification that you are aiming for, you might want to go ahead and apply for it so that you can get on a list, or you can at least have taken the exam so that when another position opens, it will be available to you and you don't miss out on it because you're not on a list. So the scores can classify you for multiple job applications, and oftentimes they have supplemental questions to confirm whether you have reached the qualifying experience, or if you need to add additional details about how you are able to perform roles for a specific job at a given department. So for some postings, you may need to take an exam and also answer supplemental questions, and the combined scores from your exam and supplemental questionnaire will qualify you for that list. In terms of interviewing, local government job interviews are fairly different in that, as Thomas mentioned, there's a huge emphasis on fairness. So typically all of the interviewees are asked the same questions. Oftentimes they will give you a sheet of paper with the questions on it and give you time to look at it, and then you will go down the list and answer each of the questions. Sometimes it depends on the department. There might not be a lot of back and forth interaction between you and the interview panel. So don't be intimidated if people aren't responding to what you're saying. Just make sure that as you're going through your questions, you're answering it as fully as possible and providing the detail and animation in terms of your demeanor to keep them engaged, even if you're getting nothing from them. And that's a common mistake that people make in their interview panel. They don't realize that sometimes we're not even allowed to answer additional questions or give feedback, because we have to be fair to all of the applicants and give them the same experience through and through. And after the interview, you will be scored based on a rubric for how well you answered the questions, and the person who scored the best will be asked to accept the job offer. And they will go down the list of scores, and often, again, like the exams, there might be a minimum score for the interviewees to reach on the interview to be eligible for an offer. Anything else you would add, Thomas or Gianna?
I was just going to say we had a couple questions in the chat on this slide. One is, what are the exams about?
Yeah, so the exams are standardized tests that test your situational knowledge most of the time. It's usually not specific, math or formulas of that type, but whether you have general information about the job classification that would give you the skills to perform that role in a broad sense. So sometimes libraries will have practice exams and information about it, and there are resources on the Department of Human Resources for individual exams that can give you a sense of what information you might expect, but it's usually general topics, what would you do in this situation type of things. And if it's for, a planner, they might ask you what certain acronyms mean or what certain legislation means, to make sure that you're familiar with the material and education behind the role.
And then the other question was about the resume work experience. Is there a place where where an applicant should kind of do the math to show exactly how they're meeting the minimum qualifications?
No, not usually. As long as you're
in terms of like the amount of time, like months or years, or
yeah, typically on the portals you can put the exact months that you started, or the exact date that you started the role, and when that role ended, and the system will do the math of how many hours that is. So you typically don't have to do the math, but if it is unclear, you might want to add something in the notes about in the work experience to make
Can I
it.
jump in just because it was my question?
Yeah.
I think the question is about, so I've been a teacher for the last 3 years, which includes a lot of analytical work, but it's not 100% of what I've been doing.
Gotcha.
And so I'm like, should I do the math in terms of like, I would say my job was 25% analysis and I did it for this many years, therefore, or is a person reading the resume going to like figure that out?
I don't think you have to do the math of like how many hours you're doing this versus that. But if it wasn't a major part of your role, I think it might be difficult as you're filling that application out to flesh out exactly what those tasks that you were doing. So as long as you're able to show that you were doing these tasks, I think you're good to say, these were the years that I was doing it. They don't expect you to be doing those tasks 100% of the time, but whether it's just a part of your role, and they'll get to that when they're reading your resume, and as you're interviewing, you'll be able to make that clear, I think.
Okay, so
I would
maybe like
agree with
within,
that. Oh, go
oh,
ahead.
just like within a job description, raise the analytical work to like the first bullet point, like the
Yeah.
beginning of my job description.
Yep, that would be a great.
That's what I was going to say. I wouldn't, people who apply, again, you're saying that you might say I worked on this project, I did this type of work, but it doesn't necessarily need to say that, well, for 4 years, 25% of my time I did this, because even somebody who's an analyst doing the work, it's not 100% of your time. So you don't need to make the math all perfect, but be able to really say in this role, a portion of my job was to do X, Y, or Z that fits those knowledge, skills, and abilities. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, so if I'm looking at a teacher, if a teacher can tell me that, I also did these other things, that I think that's really helpful. And the supplementals, depending on the agency, might be the place where you'll need to do that really well. And then on the exams, just a couple of follow-ups in terms of exams that I've seen, again, outside of the city and county of San Francisco. As an analyst, I've had exams to write a memo. So they wanted to see, how well I wrote already. And one of those memos was to set priorities. So they gave me a list of problems that came up at the end of the day on Friday, and wanted to see what I would do with that. And so just as an example of a written exam, so I had to write a memo to my boss and tell him what I would do with all these problems that came up, how I would prioritize. I just want to share an example. Another exam was in a budget office. So they wanted to understand how I would adjust budgets with a request. So, so there's some, again, depending on the organization, some specific. So if I were preparing to interview in a budget office, I would have made sure that if I hadn't done that before, I would try to find somebody in my network that had done that. And so I could ask them some questions about the job so that I could be prepared if a question did come up. So those are just some examples. Generally, if you're, getting to the point where you are qualified to be an analyst, hopefully writing a memo and setting some priorities is already something you know how to do.
And I'll add one more comment about the slide. The concept of the lists and how they get shared between departments, I think, was one of the most surprising things for me when I was first learning about city government, because it's a little bit counterintuitive, but you can actually apply for, let's say you qualify for an 1820 position. You can apply for an 1820 position in a department that you're not particularly interested in working in, and that could lead to an exam that you then do well on and are placed on a list. And they might never hire for that position, but because the hiring process is so long, sometimes another department, if they need an 1820 position, they'll just pull that list and actually reach out to people who are on that list without posting an official job opening on the website. And so you can sometimes get opportunities that you weren't expecting or that you were maybe hoping for, but are from not the department that you applied for. So it's a very, just a little bit of a tip for city government jobs.
Yeah, my last analyst job before I became a director was I had applied for a job in the facilities department of the county, and I ended up working in the 911 dispatch center as an analyst. So very different role, but they pulled the list, and the list was nearly a year old by that time. So definitely, if you're just just get yourself on the list, to the best that you can.
Great. So other local government jobs, again, we were focusing mostly on SF, but a lot of these teachings will apply to other jurisdictions as well. And just some other tips generally for job applications. You want to make sure that you proofread your application or cover letter. Don't be afraid to have someone else look it over for you and see if you've caught anything. I had a very embarrassing moment where during my interview, I said I had a great attention to detail, and then there was a typo right on my resume. Kind of undercut what I was trying to say. I did not get that job. You also want to avoid using phrases such as see resume for more details. If it asks you to put your specific work experiences in the portal, make sure that you do that. And if it asks you for resume, make sure that you do that as well. They are not substitutable for each other. And again, for supplemental questions, make sure that you add specific examples and measurable deliverables, if possible, to quantify the work that you're doing. All right, so here are just some resources that we'll have in the slides for places you can look for job opportunities. Oftentimes they will be on the HR department website for a different jurisdiction. You might find them on LinkedIn. I got my current position based off of a job posting on LinkedIn that was recommended to me by the app based on my profile. So that's also a resource that you can use. And also make sure you're talking to people in the field and seeing and having your ears out for new opportunities that are going to be posted. Sometimes you'll make connections with mentors who will have a position and have you in mind for that position, even though there is a civil service process. But if you know that a position is going to be opening in 4, 5, 6 months, having that knowledge beforehand might give you a leg up because you can make sure that you are getting the right experience to meet those minimum qualifications if you don't meet them already. Okay, so switching gears a little bit. Obviously, applying to a local government job is not your only option, and you might be thinking about applying to grad school instead, or you may be transitioning out of local government to grad school, and there are many benefits and drawbacks to both of those decisions. For some roles, as you saw in the minimum qualifications for that 1822 position, having a graduate degree is a way that you can meet the qualifying experience for a position. So if you have something in mind and feel that going to grad school will help you meet those minimum qualifications, going to grad school might be a good option instead of getting more work experience. But you also might want to wait. In some cases, you might find if you are thinking about staying in local government, a job that you're hoping to reach one day, it might not require grad school. And you might reach out to people who are in those positions and learn about the journey that they took to those roles and see, all right, well, maybe if I get experience in these areas with my jobs and internships, that will allow me to meet the minimum qualifications for a local government role. And again, you might want to go to grad school for other reasons if you want to transition out of local government. Many grad programs appreciate folks having experience before they apply, and it might give you a better idea of what you want to focus on in graduate school. So many people that are in my network, maybe they worked in local government for a few years, wasn't their passion, but they did learn a lot and gained skills that they needed and applied to grad school later. And the skills that they learned in their local government job helped them throughout their career and got them a good start. But if you are thinking of staying in local government, there's many different programs that would assist you once you're thinking of getting a job out of grad school. Some common programs are in public administration, public policy, business school, law. I did a degree in environmental science, which I hadn't intended on going into local government, but it still is relevant to the work that I do every day. I know, Deanna, you also went to grad school.
Yeah, I did a master's of business administration, so an MBA. And actually, at the time, I tell people I wasn't planning to go back into local government. I had been doing it as a child support officer, and it wasn't the role for me. I loved the work, but there wasn't a growth opportunity. So midway through, I got an internship in local government and found my spark again, working in finance and as an analyst. So definitely keep your doors open in terms of opportunities. And public administration, public policy, business, I mean, all these things that are listed really give you a wide range of opportunities. Even planning degrees, can benefit you in other ways besides just working in like the planning and development area. So.
Yep, I did a city planning master's, and although I work outside of local government, a lot of my classmates work in different departments, not just city planning, but transportation, or I think a couple of others. I'm not, can't think of it off the top of my head, but there is some like budget, or yeah, just, or some, I guess some city planners go on to be like city managers as well. I know that.
That's what I would have added, yeah, to your list. They
Yeah.
become city managers or assistant city managers. Because community development is such a significant component, or planning is usually in the community development department, but that's a significant component of what the city is, who the city
Yep.
is. So it's a great, if you're trying to grow all the way up into that city manager role, it's a great background to have.
Okay, and even if you're not planning on staying in local government, you might want to apply to jobs in the private sector. The experience that you get in local government can sometimes help you get jobs in other realms. There's quite a lot of cooperation between businesses and the private sector and government jobs, contracting, for example. And sometimes hiring managers want somebody who understands the role that the government plays and how they're going to collaborate on different projects, and having experience in that realm will give you a leg up over competition. But also, while working in the private sector, there are opportunities for social impact in the job or on nonprofit boards through professional organizations. So you can join things like City Hall Fellows, as Thomas has done, even if you don't work in local government anymore, and still find a way to get involved with expanding the workforce for local government. Also, nonprofit work can be a fulfilling alternative. Like local government, it's mission oriented and it benefits the public good. And often these organizations have diverse interest areas, and sometimes the nonprofits are dedicated to supporting local government specifically, like Friends of the San Francisco Public Library as an example. And just because you're not working in local government now doesn't mean that you can't build your capacity to come back to the public sector later on. So make sure you stay connected to your networks and learn about job opportunities going forward, and see if you enjoyed your experience coming back to do some more. All right. So some events and information to be aware of. So we manage a 6-month mentorship program where we match early career professionals with experienced professionals in local government. And Deanna is a mentor herself. And the point of the program is to give mentees information and guidance on starting their career in local government and giving connections to people that are already working in the field. We also host many training and webinars, and we have them posted on our website. So as I mentioned, this is recorded, so we'll send this out and it'll be posted on our website if you want to check it out later. And another career fair that's going to be soon, held in San Francisco on October 18th. They do plan to have some government positions represented there. All right, so that is it for the presentation. Are there any other questions that folks have for the last 8 minutes?
I have a question. And you already spoke to this a little bit. I think what's interesting about looking for jobs in city government is it doesn't follow like the model of network, and like you'll hear about things, and if you know someone, it'll get your foot in the door for an interview, which is interesting and equitable in a lot of ways. So yeah, I'm sort of thinking about what is the value of networking extensively in the space? Like talking to lots of people who work in city government, is that actually going to like give me a leg up in an application process, or is it more just informational?
I'd love to take that one. It's a little bit of both, and it's meant to be a very fair and equitable process, but depending, knowing other people in the field means that if you're applying for a job and you want to really stand out, maybe you'll know somebody in the department or know somebody who knows somebody in the department, so you'll know more about what their challenges are, how you can best frame your experiences. My last 3 positions came out of networking. I guess 2 really. So as I was transitioning positions, I met with somebody at something called Speed Coaching. It's an amazing opportunity that is done through MMA-NC. I know Michael posted their website. It usually happens around January, February as a virtual event. And it's 15 minutes of talking to a coach. And I was talking to a coach and he had an opportunity kind of in his pocket. So I was able to apply before it was posted. That was a director opportunity. My current position, again, it was posted and recruited, but I would not have applied because I didn't think that I knew enough to work in an electric utility. I was wrong. I know plenty. And so by talking to the city manager of that city, someone who was in my network through professional organizations, I was able to learn more, find out the specs were wrong. I didn't need to be an engineer. Again, you're going to find things that you might not know about, or things that are coming up. Again, knowing what their actual challenges are, so you can really frame your responses around real challenges. I know, for example, I have positions that are part-time. We call them as needed, not necessarily posted. So if, I can just start from a resume and then like the application comes later. So there are some, they're not full civil service opportunities. You don't have the same job protections, but there's just things that aren't necessarily all the way out there. So I've found networking to be massively valuable. I also find that as a hiring manager, when I've seen somebody before, I recognize if there's somebody who's valuing professional development, I believe that they'll, value it in the organization as well. Something I have to be mindful of, because that's a little bit of a privilege. So I have to be mindful that everybody can pull that off. You might have reasons that you're not involved in organizations that are, life reasons. And so it's something I have to balance when I look at candidates, not to just assume that makes this candidate better than another candidate, but it definitely, knowing somebody as much as we'd like to be totally fair and equitable, it does have some benefit to, at least to knowing what positions are out there and what those real needs are, so you can present your best self, your best qualities.
Yeah, and I'll add to that. I think Michael mentioned this briefly, but they're sometimes called like PEX or something like that, and they're basically temporary or project-based positions that are usually on a 1 to 3 year contract, and so you don't have all the civil service protections, but they also tend to have a little bit more flexibility and be able to like hire them more quickly. And so sometimes those can be a great way to get started. And then from there, because it's such a long process to get a civil service job, like oftentimes someone who's in one of those roles can kind of see what's going on in the department, see what other roles are coming available, and make sure that they're, applying for other upcoming available positions. And similarly, like, sometimes people will take maybe, whatever junior analyst position they can get, for example, if you're entry level, because once you kind of get that eye into the organization, it can help you give you a little bit of a leg up. And the last piece I'll say is the networking or asking questions of people in your network can help demystify a little bit, because sometimes the job descriptions can be really generic and like you're kind of wondering, what actually is this job doing? And somebody on the inside can kind of tell you, even if it's not apparent from the job description, because it's kind of a generic one.
All right, any other questions?
I wanted to close myself with, I put my email in the chat if anybody wants to reach out directly. Also, I wanted to share one experience. So I mentioned that 2 of my jobs were through networking, which made them easier to find and secure and learn more about. But before that, my first director job, I decided I wanted to be a director, and I was struggling to make that leap. And it took me, frankly, 90 applications, different jobs, a lot of interviews to land that job coming out of a management analyst role. I landed in the perfect role, but I just wanted to say, to encourage all of you to be resilient. I, at that time, decided to set myself a goal to send out 2 applications a week and, participate in interview processes. And I had a lot of flexibility in terms of where I could live and where I could be. But I think in any job search, resilience is going to be key. So, don't give up too soon. If you don't have the bandwidth to do kind of all of that moving and interviewing and being in different places, then really zero in on the best jobs for you. But the broader you can be, don't be scattershot. Don't be, applying for a director job if you just finished your bachelor's degree. But, if there's a lot of analyst jobs out there, look at a lot of those. I happen to be looking at a neighboring city today, and they had a lot of analyst roles with continuous recruitment. So, look at those, see if those are a fit for you. If you can be a little bit outside of, Michael's at BART. So he's, I think you're in Oakland, right? At BART?
Yeah.
So instead of being in the city, he's just outside of the city. Some agencies are more hybrid than others. There's a lot of different types of flexibility or not. Some agencies are still fully in person. So you'll have to kind of look at what some of those things are. That, again, that's a piece of networking that you'll be able to do as well, to know like what that agency is doing, if that's important for you. Instead of getting into an interview process and finding out, that that part's not a fit for you. So definitely be resilient, find those cheerleaders. When I was doing that, it was really, really hard. There were definitely some hard moments, but I had people who every so often I would just catch up with them, and they would kind of remind me, A, why I was doing it, and B, it is hard and it's okay. I was often kind of second place. I would hear that a lot, which helped me to go forward. being able to, again, have that network so you run into people to remind you of that. You know, you always get to find out, not always, but at the position I was at, I would get to find out as a director, you see who gets to be the director because it gets published. And so I would say, oh, well, they just had more experience. Okay, that makes sense. And now there's this different opening. I'll go look for that one. So really just, you know, have some support so you can kind of be resilient through that process. When I became an analyst, I don't remember the number of jobs I applied for, but that was back when I would have to like mail the applications before we had CalOps and Gov jobs. And so there was a lot of those too. And so, you know, it's a lot easier when you have CalOps and Gov jobs, and it's kind of one for each one. Definitely double check your information as you apply for new jobs. Make sure you've kept it up to date. It's really easy to accidentally have not put your new job in or not closed out the last job. But it's a lot easier. And I found in my life that wherever I've landed has been the right place. It's sometimes maybe just taken a little more time than I expected.
Yeah, I would just say, like Deanna, I've applied for a lot of jobs, including government, and it is a marathon, not a sprint. So just keep on trucking, and sometimes it can be tedious. Try to keep your information organized in one spot, like your job history and stuff, so that you can easily fill out those applications. Because I would say they're getting better, where sometimes they'll like save the stuff you've previously entered, but sometimes they have their own system, and you have to re-enter all of the same information, what feels like over and over again. And it's just part of the process, and you know, just stick with it.
Yeah, even the supplementals will get a bit redundant, and you'll be able to just modify one a little bit.
All right, so we are at 6:32. So just wanted to say thank you all for joining us and for asking such great questions. And special thank you to Thomas and Deanna for sharing their thoughts and expertise. So as I mentioned, we're going to be sending this recording out to you all if you want to take a look at it later, as well as the slides. And if you want to stay involved with City Hall Fellows, please make sure you sign up for our mailing list on our website, and we will keep in touch. Thank you. Have a good night.
Thanks,
Can I
everyone.
quickly
Have a
ask
good
one
night.
more question?
Sure.
So I've been applying for jobs at the city, and I'm wondering if every single person who meets minimum qualifications, do they get the exam, or is it just a select number of people who meet minimum qualifications?
I think if you meet the minimum qualifications, then you're eligible to take the exam. Yes.
Okay. And then if you don't meet them, they will get back to you and say you did not
Yes.
meet them. Okay. And then got it.
Yes.
Okay.
And if you want to dispute that, usually there's a contact on the job position that you can reach out to ask for more details about why you didn't meet the minimum qualifications. It actually happened to me for a job that I had previously. I had an 1822 position, and the HR analyst said I didn't meet the minimum qualifications, but in fact I did. So I had to go back and get my transcript from college and show her the courses that I took, and then she let me proceed to the next step. So if you do run into a problem, don't give up. Just be persistent, and good luck.
Great.
And think as well about local cities and counties. So I know San Francisco is city and county together, but if you know, to get in and then maybe have that experience, so San Mateo or Alameda County, you know, if those are options for you. A lot of people kind of miss county. They look at cities and they miss county. So think about that as well to broaden your search radius.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much. This has been really helpful.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thanks, Michael,
Thanks,
for organizing.
everyone. Thanks, Michael.
Have a
Thanks,
good
Paul.
night.
Bye-bye.